Today we're going to be talking about crime. And I like to get up here because I think that there's a lot of things wrong with the world, and one of the ways that I can affect some of that change is by talking to you. So I'm going to ask that you keep an open mind during this presentation. My mentor always told me to start with gratitude, so I'm going to do that. I would just like to point out, and I'm not sure if any of you guys know this, but Journal Club's actually been going for like 6 years. But in the first few years, it was like 12 people, and there's been 2 people who have been here almost every single time and supported us for years and years and years. So to Dave Maxwell and Will Torres, thank you guys for showing up every week for years and years and years. To you insane children who get up early to come here at 7:30 in the morning for no credit, I try to explain this to my friend. I try to explain this to people. And I can't, right? I'm like, yeah, so there's these high schoolers, and they show up before school, and their minds are blown. But we could not have this program without you, so thank you. To the Journal Club exec team, guys, for the last 3 years, they have put on and trained a presenter every Thursday for the last 3 years. Mark, did you figure out how many journals you read the other day? Is that you? 100. You read 100 journal articles? The amount of work they put in is insane. They start 6 weeks out, so please, a hand for them. And to the doctors, Fuffles, Kirkhart, Proudfoot, and Shelley. Dr. Fuffles, because this presentation actually grew out of arguments we've been having in the car for a while. Dr. Kirkhart for helping to vet me yesterday. Dr. Proudfoot, where's he? Yeah. For giving me the strength for this presentation together. And Dr. Shelley for also vetting me yesterday. Like I said, or like Sid said, I'm taking a little bit of leeway. The first 2 times you're up here, you basically have to present a straight journal article. But today, I want to tell a bit of a story, and that's something that you can do as a third-time presenter. So it's important to distinguish between when I'm presenting data and when I'm talking about my own opinion. So if you have a question about that, please ask. This is also meant to be a discussion-based journal club. I've gone shorter, so hopefully we'll have time at the end to talk about this. But again, put your hand up. If you have an idea, please share it. And the themes that we talk about today are going to be slightly mature. And so I'm going to ask that you all, like me, be mature. So here we go. There's a philosophical question, and it's called the MindBody Problem. And I'm going to illustrate it with this kind of diagram. Let's say there's a guy, George. And let's say George is ridiculously annoying. And let's say for his own good, he has a friend named Luke who, to correct his behavior, kicks him. George, of course, thanks him. Now, let's look at that again. Luke made a decision. That decision somehow was transferred to a neuron, which transferred some information down spine into the leg, which translated to a muscle, which translated to a kick, which translated to George. One more time. Decision, nerves, muscle, foot, George. Now, let's look at this picture a little more closely. And what we see is there's somebody in the background. Now, what you didn't notice is that person also finds George ridiculously annoying. And in that person's hand, there's a little clicker. Connected to that clicker are some wires, and those wires go directly into Luke's brain. So, when George does something annoying, the observer clicks the button, the electric signals travel down, the wires, they travel into Luke's brain, they activate the neurons, which send the signal down to his muscles, which cause the leg, which cause the kick, which hit George. Okay. So, if you look at the start of this whole process, in the 2 scenarios, you'll see there's 2 starts, right? There's the decision in one case, and there are the wires in the other case. So this idea, do you guys know who Descartes is? You guys know what the Cartesian plane is? You know X and Y graph problems? Okay, he's the guy that made that up. So he actually generated this problem. So in the case of the wires, it's not really difficult to figure out where the impulse came from to kick. It was from the wires. But in the case of the decision, you have to kind of ask a question like, that decision somehow affected matter, right? Our thought, or whatever it was, somehow affected matter. And it changed that matter. It changed a neuron from an off-firing state to an on-firing state. And we like to believe in our society that that decision is kind of above matter. So maybe I can put this better by the wires. So some people think the wires are a metaphor. So wires flow into your brain, just like information flows into our brain, through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue. And our brain essentially can act like a computer, take all those things in, and spit out an output. Now, we like to believe that there's something in between that in and that out that we control. So, my first question to you is, in the situation where I made the decision to kick George for his own good, it's a random person, okay? Did I have free will? Raise your hand if you think yes. Okay. Who's confused? Anybody confused? All right. In the second situation, where there were electrodes hooked up to my brain, which transferred that information to my foot, did I have free will? Raise your hand if you think I had free will in the wire situation. Nice. So the idea of free will is built into our society. It's like in the our original documents, and it's certainly found in our justice system. We believe that there are people that make decisions that govern bodies, literally bodies, like our bodies. We make the decision to determine our own behavior, right? We like to think that. And our justice system is based on that. We believe that given a situation, there's a right and a wrong, and these bodies get to choose one of those outcomes, and that they should choose the right one. And if they don't, we negatively reinforce them so that they do the next time. Again, at the heart of this is the ability to choose. So, what would it look like if we didn't choose? What would it look like if our hand was forced? What would it look like if we didn't have free will? I know it's kind of a weird concept, but just think about it. So I'm going to ease you into it. This is a study, and it's a pretty simple one. There are men who had underdeveloped gonads, so they weren't producing enough testosterone. These men were given a therapeutic or high-level dose of testosterone over the course of 4 weeks. So here you have an anger and hostility measure. So basically they were asked to describe themselves, and depending on certain adjectives they used, they were rated as a certain amount of angry or hostile, and their partners also rated them in the same way. This is time down here, and what you're going to see is not anything crazy. So before they started, there was no statistical difference between two groups, one that received testosterone and one that did not. At week 2 here, you see a significant difference between the group that received the testosterone and the group that didn't. These people are much more aggressive. And at week 4, you see that difference start to equalize. Those people may have become, what's the word when you like, tolerant, there we go. I've got like nervous. Become tolerant to the effects of testosterone. So, does testosterone, in this case, forced aggression? Aggression wasn't a choice, it was injected. But people weren't necessarily doing crazy things. So in this situation, where I can take one of you, and I can inject you with testosterone, and this will not work for everybody. Testosterone does not always cause aggression. There have been plenty of studies that show testosterone can just cause weight gain and doesn't affect the brain as much as we thought, or behavior as much as we thought. But for our purposes, let's say I inject you with testosterone. You become aggressive. Does that mean I've taken away your free will?
Didn't you choose to inject yourself with testosterone, or was that forced against you?
So yeah, that's a very good. How old are you? 15? Nice. That's a really good question. But if we follow that one, we're going to run into a little loop problem, and I don't want to do that quite yet. So let's take a crime, and a violent crime. Let's say you're driving, you get cut off, and you come to a stoplight, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get this guy. You get out of your car, and you punch their car. I don't know why you would find that funny. It's a completely realistic situation that I think most of you would do given the environment. All right. But I inject you with testosterone. Does that mean have you lost your free will? Are you definitely going to go and punch that car?
No.
Why not? You should stay away from cars for a while. Why isn't a person plus testosterone, which translate into aggression, enough to force a crime? Yeah.
It may increase the odds of committing a crime, but it won't guarantee you'll commit a crime.
Why not?
Because it's not
Okay. We have some aspect of control, right? We like to believe, at least, that we have some aspect of control. But last week, where's Alyssa? Last week, Alyssa presented an article on the Insula and the fact that it was involved in compulsive and impulsive decisions. And that when it was made small, and we're not going to produce the conflicting stuff, but when it was small, the ability to regulate or to inhibit the compulsive and impulsive behavior was diminished. So basically, what if there's an organ, and I'm oversimplifying here. What if there's an organ that allows you to have control? And some people have big ones, and some people have small ones. So this translates into humans. The earliest case is the case of Phineas Gage, who, if you take psych, is like, he is psych. Right? So he's walking around one day, and then he's, I don't know exactly why, but on a railroad, and he sneezed and somehow got a railroad stake stuck up through his jaw. None of that is true except for the railroad spike stuck up through his jaw part. It went up through the bottom of his jaw, through his eye, through the front of his skull, and out the top of his skull. The interesting thing about Phineas Gage is that he lived. But he was a little different. Not in the way you would think. He could function normally, he could do most motor tasks pretty well, but it turns out he got a little angry. He went from being a nice person to, yeah, he lost executive control. What? Well, okay, yeah. I may be simplifying this a little bit. But yeah, he went from this nice guy to a really aggressive guy. And people hypothesized it was because something in the part in front of the brain helped people to control things. And if you look at fMRIs, which are these machines which follow oxygen to the brain, you'll see when people are making executive or control decisions, the front parts of the brain often light up. We think that the front part of the brain is involved in control. It is not control. Control doesn't live in one part of the brain, but it's definitely involved in that control. And you can have different sizes this part of the brain. It's been shown to be decreased in, this part of the brain has been shown to be decreased in addicts. Specifically, there was a journal presentation here a couple years ago on women doing cocaine who kept relapsing, and the one commonality they found was that decreased part of the brain. So, is decreased control and aggression enough to make a to make a crime? The case where you walk out and punch the car. If I decrease your ability to control yourself and I make you angry, are you then necessarily going to commit a crime? Why are you guys so hard to convince? Yeah.
Well, I think as we looked at the first piece of data, that, I think it's definitely contingent on how much testosterone you have, before you inject it. So I think, we react differently whether or not you're a male or female, or depending on your levels of regular testosterone.
Okay, I want you to remember that. Yeah.
When you're talking about using aggression or using testosterone as a means of determining whether or not you're doing it, are you talking about? Are you saying there are some crimes that can be determined by testosterone, or all aggressive crimes can be determined?
No, I'm definitely not talking about all crimes. I'm talking about, very good question, I'm talking about a very specific subset of crimes.
All aggressive or just certain aggressive?
Certain aggressive crimes.
Okay.
Certain aggressive crimes. Aggressive crimes where you don't kind of have the premeditative aspect. So
you just you just come up and
you just lose it.
Okay.
The lose it kind of crimes. Yeah, Chell? What? Let's get 5 minutes. Okay. Now, I said this presentation was going to be about, I'm going to run out of time again. I said this presentation was going to be about crime as a symptom. So what if we just erase everything that we just learned about crime, or about aggression, or about criminal behavior? What if we designed a study that looked at it kind of objectively? What would we have to do? We'd have to follow people over the course of their lives and look at all the things that we did, see which ones are criminals, and then see what they had in common. That would be a good place to start, right? And that's exactly what this study did here. It is definitely not the best study, but there is something that I really, really like about it. It started in 1953, where they followed people at the age of 8. They took certain information about them, how they got along with their parents, and followed them to the age of 16, at which time these children were asked about how they participated in sports and what their home lives were like. At 18, their heart rates were taken. They were asked if they smoked. They were asked if they drank. They were asked if they were impulsive, and their teachers were asked how they were in class. Then they waited until 50 years later, at which point the researchers evaluated whether or not they'd committed crimes. They went back and verified whether or not the crimes had been committed. What's kind of interesting is that they used a computer to do this after 1994, but before 1994 they actually had to go back to newspapers, which sucked. So, real simple question. These are the things they looked at: smoking, impulsivity, family problems, bad relationships with teachers, sports, binge drinking, heart rate, and BMI. Which do you think best predicted crime, criminal behavior? No, you can't answer this. Yeah. Impulsivity. Who agrees with them? Who thinks that I have something up my sleeve? It wasn't impulsivity. It was heart rate. Low heart rate is one of the best predictors of criminal behavior that there is. During adolescence, a low heart rate is one of the best predictors of criminal activity that there is. The predictive power of that is approaching 50% right now. And the question is why? Does low heart rate cause crime? If I calm myself, do I suddenly come angry? That doesn't make any sense. Well, sometimes when you see a relationship between two things and they both increase, and one doesn't cause the other, it's because one thing caused both of them. So what could low heart rate and crime have in common? What could cause both of them? tell you as a society that stress is bad for you. But it turns out too little stress is not a great thing. I looked at study after study after study, and this low heart rate thing kept coming up. And it turns out that impulsivity and crime can be predicted by this heart rate thing. And also, when you look at the brains of the people that are committing crime and have a low heart rate, what you find is that there's a small part of the brain called the amygdala. And it's usually underformed or it's underfunctioning. Again, we know the problems associated with stress. You guys aren't supposed to be under a lot of stress, and you have your teachers to thank for keeping you stress-free. But what happens when you have too little stress? Well, you feel bad when you are negatively disciplined, right? When you are disciplined. But what if you lacked that feeling of bad? You might then lose the ability to learn from negative feedback. And what if you looked at people and when you saw pain on their face, you didn't feel it? That can generate a type of behavior called sociopathy, okay? And the classic question in sociopathy is, or the way you can tell a sociopath, and this is a little cliche, but there's a train on a track and it's headed for a wall. And there's a little switcher on the track that will change the chain from left to right. And you're up above and all you've got, no rocks, no nothing else, all you've got is George. And so the question is, do you take George, throw him down to his certain death, to hit that lever, to move that train, to save 100 people? Now, you might answer yes or no, but most of you, 1 or 99 out of 100 of you, at least, will have a problem making that decision. It will take you a little bit longer. You will hesitate. A sociopath will not. The extreme form of sociopathy is called psychopathy. All right, it is a psychopath, a person who is violent and can't consider how others are feeling. And it's all at the root of it. If you look at psychopaths' brains, there are 3 conditions. There's insular damage, there's prefrontal cortex damage, and there's amygdala damage. And what that translates into in behavior is the inability to control their behavior and the inability to feel what others feel. So, there's a lot of questions that this generates. One of the primary ones is what happens when you put a psychopath in jail. Jail is negative reinforcement. And if you have a person who doesn't learn from negative reinforcement, what happens when you negatively reinforce their actions? So, does that mean we should treat psychopaths and regular people differently? Does that mean we should tailor prison?
There's a black Nissan Pathfinder in the parking lot where lights are on.
Does that mean we should look at criminal behavior and tailor it to some person's genetics? Or do 2 people, if I have 2 people and they commit the same crime, and one is not able to control themselves, like a child, and another one is, are they guilty of the same crime? Right now, psychopaths or sociopaths occupy 1% of the population, they're 25% of the present population. We have an incredible amount of people in jail, and what we're doing isn't working because we're not stopping people from going back. Can you imagine what I would say, or what a person would say, if I gave you a psychopath who had committed a heinous crime, and I said, instead of putting them in jail, what we're going to do is give them back rubs and lollipops. I don't know if that would work, but the point is that I give them positive feedback instead of negative feedback. They've just killed someone, and we give them back rubs. The interesting thing there is which is more important to us. The idea of justice, or the idea of punishing the person that has killed someone, or the idea that we don't want it to happen again, because the two aren't the same. I hope in this presentation I've raise some questions. I don't want to explain things as much as I want you to be questioning things as you leave here. I want you to be interested. I want you to be curious. I want you to question the way things are.